Chatelet, folks. I was talking to the missus about my time in Afghanistan, and I told her about something that had her floored. I figured it might be interesting to y'all as well. So, in the Army, I was a special electronics technician, and I did brigade level support for the 4th Brigade of the 82nd Airborne. And in 2012, the 82nd Airborne was in RC South, which is basically around Kandahar in Afghanistan. And that was kind of my area of operations for keeping their electronics in pretty good shape. So I almost had my own helicopter, and I flew around to a whole bunch of little bases and FOBs and sometimes a caravans. And all I really did was, like, I don't know, people's Xboxes would be overheating from the dust. And there's a lot of overheating issues with electronics in the desert that I don't think that America was really prepared for. But anyways, there's only so many Xboxes for me to fix. So I spent more time, out on mission doing QRF for the wrecker vehicles because IEDs be hitting our trucks, and then doing brigade level support, going and recovering trucks from poor bastards that got hit. So, I had my air-conditioned shelter that got flown in while everybody else was digging trenches, filling sandbags, having a real hard time. And I'm just like guiding in my shelter that already had HughesNet internet wired up, already had air conditioning ready to go, and it was just packed full to the brim with Skittles and Black and Milds. And so those poor bastards were digging in. Some of them, as soon as they arrived in theater, they had to start walking alongside their trucks. So they were 2 months deep, re-dipping the same lip that they had been since they got off the plane with me, just walking up the side of some mountain, and then they got shot, and they call us to help. So then I get a call. I'm sitting in my air-conditioned shelter with my Black and Milds, and I go rescue these guys. And it was a pretty cool experience. Your experience may vary. If you have a high-speed job, the chances of enjoying your time in war is a lot more than if you have something sucky. But if you have a high-speed job in theater, it's way suckier than if you have something like grunt work in the rear. Because if you got grunt work in the rear, there's a lot of prestige. And if you got a high-speed job in the rear, you're gonna be working your ass off trying to keep all the fucking Zoom calls and Skype conferences going. But anyways, so I was going around, I visited the Afghan soldiers basically everywhere, all over the RC South. And the pornography that the Afghan soldiers were into was a little bit striking to me. And the reason is there was no nudity in most of it. And so part of the mission that Obama did, shortly after we arrived, he changed the mission. It went from being, rape and pillage and, first ID, that guy walked off post in Kandahar and shot up the village. We were the unit that relieved them. So the locals weren't super thrilled to be meeting us. And I took it upon myself to try and be kind of an ambassador liaison. And I got really cozy with the Afghan people. And hanging out with the Afghan soldiers who we were training basically to take our place once we were ready to leave. They had never experienced computers and stuff before. For the most part, a lot of them were just shepherds. And we sat them in front of some old Microsoft XP on an old ass tower, and we tried to teach them how to do home group sharing of files. So if you wanted to get your little ANA Toyota truck worked on, you could pull into the motor pool, and the motor pool could just send the receipt across the fob without having to write the stuff down in Pashto, and the guy who's processing paperwork on the other side probably only reads Farsi if they can read it all. But anyways, so we were setting up networks, and they always were quick to find the pornography, and I think that's pretty common for everybody that gets on the internet. The first thing you do is you find the tits. So the tits that they had on all these computers that seemed preloaded, to be honest, it was like you install a new copy of Windows XP off of their bootleg discs that usually had some Family Guy Season 2 bootleg written on it, but it was really XP. You load it up, and then the pictures folder would already be full of porn. And all the porn that they looked at was wheat fields. Like, I remember in 2014 and 15 when we were getting together our alt-right crew, you know, most of the icons that we were using for women was like cottagecore, you know, a ginger with too many freckles and a sundress standing in the middle of like a meadow. Almost all the porn that these Afghan soldiers was, oh my bad, almost all of their porn was that. Now, there were Afghan soldiers who had, you know, the little Razor flip phones, because this is 2012, and in their Razor flip phone they said had some homemade shit of them fucking goats, kids or whatever. But if they tried to pull that out while I was teaching them how to set up the internet, you know, most of the guys would bully shame them, kick them out, kick them in the ass. You know, we don't need to see that. And so that bacha bazi is pretty Semitic even to the people of Afghanistan. They're not loving it. So don't make it out like that's what they're all about, because it's just a small Judeo-Christian influence that's causing them to do that shit. And so we went out on mission, and we weren't doing wrecker mission to recover people that got blowed up. There was a couple times we pulled security for the local governments that we were installing. And when we were pulling security, we were just making sure that the locals couldn't take their kids back, as the local government that we were installing was raping them. And that's what we spent a lot of time doing if we weren't just recovering vehicles. So most of the troop movements are just to keep the fobs happy, you know, and there's so many civilians from Africa and India working the fobs, you know, working the kitchens and the fobs, that they get mail from home. So most of the convoys are just like comfy, cozy mail trucks, mail trips. We're living here now being police, and we got to get our amenities. So there was a weekly, you know, mail trip, and every other week it got blown up, and that's what we went and rescued. And it was a lot of fun to be in war. It was a lot more fun than being in the rear, because in the rear, you know, you gotta wear your hat. You take 3 steps away from your door, you have to have your hat on. Like, that stuff gets really, really frustrating when you're going home at the end of the day. You get out of your car and you don't have your hat on, and your neighbor reports you to your commander because you walked from your driveway to your house without your fucking hat on in uniform. But that's the way the high-speed 82nd is supposed to be, and that's kind of how they do the hazing. And that's alright. But the pornography that the Afghan soldiers were into was quite striking, because it wasn't the conventional type of porn. It was white women in sundresses. Have a good one, y'all.